All the way back on draft day of the 2025 NHL draft, we saw one of the biggest trades of the offseason, with Noah Dobson getting shipped off to the Montreal Canadiens. And it sparked so much talk, so much hype, and so much conversation, but a few months later, how has this trade turned out, and how is it looking for both teams? Now that we've seen the start of the season for all the players involved, I want to go through this trade for each team and explain why I think it's a huge win-win for both the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Islanders. So make sure you guys watch till the end as we break down this entire trade to see who might come out on top in the end, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout the year. Now, when talking about Islanders top defensemen, it actually reminds me, I made a member video a couple weeks back talking about Matthew Schaefer's great start to the season, and just recently made a video ranking my favorite teams in the league and least favorite in the league as well, but that's all on the member side. Basically, if you join, hit the join button or hit the link in the description down below to become a member. You'll get exclusive videos every single week, plus you'll be included in the exclusive member polls every week, as well as have exclusive emoji for the comments. It's a great way to support the channel, and if you guys want to go just that extra step further, I highly appreciate it. And you get your name up on the screen right here with all these other beautiful folks. But let's talk about this Noah Dobson trade. That was an absolute landmark deal at the time, one of the biggest of the offseason looking back, and so far, I think has been such a win-win, such a positive development for both sides involved. And really, when we look at it, I don't think there's necessarily any downsides for anybody. But at the time, the Canadiens were rumored to go after a right-shot defenseman. There had been a lot of talk about Rasmus Anderson, but ultimately they came to Noah Dobson, and I think it was a pretty good fit at the time, a pretty balanced trade at the time, but honestly, now just a few months later, I think it's looking even better for both sides involved. Now, for the Canadiens, if you're trading for a top 4 right-shot defenseman, you're going to be giving up quite a bit of assets. But they gave up 3, with Emil Heineman on the forward side, adding a roster player onto the Islanders, and 2 first-round picks, the 16th and 17th overall, which the Islanders would later select Victor Eklund out of Sweden and Kashan Aitchison out of the OHL's Barrie Colts. Especially at the time, I thought these were 2 really solid picks as well for the Islanders, especially Victor Eklund, who I thought was just a very projectable NHLer long-term, was probably like a second liner. Getting that 16th overall, I thought was just really good value for the Islanders, as well as a rock star like Kashan Aitchison being added onto that defense, on top of course, Matthew Schaefer being selected first overall. But now talking about how this has developed into this NHL season, let's first start out with the Montreal Canadiens. And I don't think the Noah Dobson trade could have worked out much better for them so far. Now, recently maybe he's made a couple of mishaps, but I would say, in my opinion of Dobson, at least last year, was that he was a bit of an inconsistent defenseman, especially when it came to his decision-making with his positioning. He's a big defenseman and has a great skating ability, but just kind of felt unsure of himself at times. Kind of reminds me of the similar situation that K'Andre Miller was facing last year before he also got dealt to the Canes. But you could see the talent, you could see the potential, and especially on the offensive side, what he had been able to prove for himself in 2024, getting 70 points and 10 goals in 79 games, but I wasn't quite sure whether he was going to be the defensive presence that maybe Montreal needed a bit more of, because I always saw him as more of that offensive, puck-moving defenseman. But I would say so far, the biggest thing that has surprised me with Dobson has been that consistency on defense. And again, there's been a couple of mishaps recently, but season-wide so far, I think he's been an absolute success, especially with him and Mike Matheson, who have had great chemistry so far, have been, quite frankly, Montreal's best pairing throughout the course of this season. And even though there's been a couple of issues at times, they're playing so many minutes that, of course, there's going to be a couple issues that happens, especially over the course of 9 different games. I think he's looked pretty fantastic, getting 1 goal, 5 points, and not having explosive offensive production or anything, but he's playing a lot of minutes. He's playing penalty kill, he's playing in defensive situations, and winning a lot of those situations. And again, that was kind of my biggest worry on Montreal's side with the Dobson trade, was how he was going to fit. Was he going to be more of an offensive guy? Was he going to have to lean on the power play? Was that going to be a problem because Lane Hudson is obviously going to take that power play one time, and how that was going to fit? But I think Dobson's fit himself into much more of a defensive style, much more of a defensive role, and it's always kind of just been the habits that have kept him away from that. He has the size, he has the skating ability to play well on his own end, just hasn't been able to string that together consistently. And I think he's now finally starting to learn that here with the Habs. It's a little bit sad that he had to get traded to find that game in himself, but I think it's more so just the role Montreal was kind of placing him in, whereas with the Islanders, especially before Matthew Schaefer's burst onto the scene, Dobson was kind of the only guy that could consistently move the puck reliably, and that was kind of his role with the Islanders. In Montreal, though, it's a bit more of a two-way system he's having to play, and I think that's kind of what he's suited more for. The fact that I can sit here and say that Mike Matheson has been reliable this season is a genuine, it's a genuine compliment towards Dobson's game and really Matheson's game. I think both of these guys have really uplifted each other in pretty massive ways and have made each other look a lot better than they have before, especially Matheson, man. The defensive game that Matheson has had has also been a bit scary. I'm like, who is this the right player we're talking about here? But that's how good that first pairing has been for Montreal, that the rest of the lineup has kind of been shifted a bit. They've tried to mix and match different players, trying to see what fits, what doesn't, and it's kind of been a bit of a jumbled mess at times. But Matheson Dobson has been the constant so far for Montreal, really in all situations. And now that Lane Hutson is starting to find his game too, I think that makes the Matheson Dobson pair look even better. They're going to be putting in more defensive minutes as well, which will be the test for them for sure, but I think with how they played so far, I'm pretty confident in that sticking. Still, of course, a lot more time throughout the season and throughout the rest of this contract for Dobson to prove himself. But I think so far for what Montreal has needed, what they've needed in that establishment and the top pair, Dobson's been able to bring. He's come as advertised, and quite frankly, I think has been better than even I was expecting. I was expecting kind of like a 50-point, more offensive-leaning player, somebody that would play his best defense by playing offense and having the puck. But my goodness, I think Dobson has been using his strengths a lot more recently, and that's just a great development to see because the talent was always pretty clearly on display. So for Montreal, I think it's a pretty big win here, especially considering the assets they gave up, players that I don't think were going to play a massive role for them long term. I mean, Heidemann, we'll talk about, he's a very solid player, but the two mid first round picks, Montreal could absolutely use them for sure, but they already have a really good prospect pool with so many prospects that are further along in the process, and I don't think for Montreal and their contending status and how much they want to improve, that a player like Ekland or Agerson, as good as I think they both are, would have made much of a difference. Sure, it would have added to the prospect pool, but that's not exactly what Montreal needs at this stage. But you know what team does need picks? You know what team does need those impact players? That is the New York Islanders. And I mean, considering what the Islanders needed, they pretty much swung for the fences and I think hit a home run here. You look at the main player they got back in this deal in Emil Heineman, and he was kind of, maybe not the throwaway, but maybe the weakest in terms of pure value coming back to the Islanders, mostly just to fill a roster spot for some folks they saw. But I think Heineman kind of always had a bit of untapped potential per se with his speed, with his shot combo, but it just didn't really come together in Montreal. Similar situation to Dobson, where you could see the talent, just didn't really get the right spot or the right role to succeed. But I think Heineman has gotten the right role to succeed in the Island, because so far through 7 games, he has 5 goals, 1 assist through 6 games. Whenever I tune in to Islanders games as well, he's always using that speed, using that intensity, and bringing it more physical play too. He's kind of becoming much more of an all-around package, something that can be a reliable every single shift, can put out value even when he's not scoring, and the fact that he's also scoring on top of that is a pretty nice sign. The strength was always the goal scoring and always that finishing ability, but again, what Heineman has been able to do outside of that goal scoring has, I think, elevated his level of game and elevated his time on ice as well, and it's fully deserving because he's quite frankly been one of the Islanders' best forwards. They've had some pretty big surprises so far, but I would say none are as important as Heineman's progression. The hope is that he can continue to use that speed and skill in conjunction and start to find it in more consistent ways. That, I think, will be the make or break for Heineman, because obviously we're 7 games in and he's looking pretty good, but how will he look at game 40? How will he look at game 80? Will he still be at the same level there? That'll be the big question for me, but so far, so good, and I think in terms of the talent, you're starting to see what he's been really made of for a long time now. With Heineman, he's playing that role very perfectly right now on the first line with Jonathan Drouin and Bo Horvat, which I think is just a really well-constructed line. You have Bo Horvat, who can do a lot of the dirty work, bring that physicality. Drouin, who of course has that gifted playmaking ability, and Heineman, who has that speed and shooting and just has the ability to finish on so many different plays. It's really just a perfect match. It's kind of like Montreal's first line, where they have the different play styles that can fit everybody's needs, but especially for the Islanders, this one has been absolutely rolling, and for really all 3 players, they're all guys I do like, I love watching, and that success has been really a lot of fun to watch. But still, that type of goal-scoring asset that has the speed of Heineman, who doesn't really sacrifice too much defensively, is a great weapon to have in your system, and he was looked at as maybe the 3rd most important piece of this deal. As of now, though, he's looking really important for this Islanders team going forward. But let's also talk about the 2 first-round picks the Islanders selected with the picks they got in the Noah Dobson trade in Victor Eklund and Kashan Aitchison. 2 guys that I don't think have lit the world on fire necessarily in terms of production, but still 2 guys who I think are very projectable towards the NHL. First, let's start out with Victor Eklund, who I was a big fan of in this last draft. And again, he's not somebody that's going to be putting up a point per game in the SHL or anything, but I don't think he necessarily has to. So far through 12 games, he has 5 assists for 5 points, 0 goals. But I think in terms of Eklund's game, he is best as that support player, kind of like a Heineman. He had bring, maybe not in a perfect comparison in terms of the style, but in terms of their role, Eklund is just somebody that brings so much intensity, so much maturity in his body and in the board battles, and just how he's able to translate the puck forward. He's just a guy that will do so much for you, so many of the little detail things that lead to goals in the end. He's not necessarily the most skilled player in the world. He's not going to wow you with these highlight reel dangles or anything, but I think considering his size, he's one of those menaces that you don't really expect too much from, that's able to win the puck from you pretty consistently. I look at the long-term fits for the Islanders in that forward group, and a player like Eklund alongside a Barzal in that center group, or a Callum Ritchie perhaps, I think both of those guys can kind of use that winger that can do a lot of those board battles, do a lot of the physicality there, do the heavy lifting, and I think Eklund has the possibility to do that. Obviously, the big thing will be, will a 5'11" forward be able to translate that way onto the NHL? But I just think for how good Eklund is, for how detailed his game is, I have doubts that I have no doubts that he'll be able to translate that at least to a good level. We'll see how much of a top end forward he ends up being, but I think at least as a complementary piece, he's going to be pretty perfect on that forward group. Then we move on to the defensive ad in Kashan Aitchison at 17th overall, and he was one I was really shocked to see drop as much as he did, but I think in Aitchison's case, he's going to round out very well as just this bottom pair, maybe middle pair, physical defenseman who just brings so much intensity, so much entertainment on the ice. I mean, people are already wowed by what Matthew Schaefer can do offensively, and that is, of course, a great thing to see with the skating ability there, but Aitchison's going to wow you in different ways, with the big hits, with the fighting, with the snarl that he brings to the game. He is going to be a fan favorite pretty much immediately. So far, the production hasn't been too bad either for more of a defensive, physical player, but of course, the goal scoring is the main thing in Aitchison's game. 26 goals last year in 64 games, now up to 6 goals, more goals than he has assists, at 11 points through 11 OHL games. That's kind of just Aitchison, though. That booming slap shot is really what you come for in his offensive game. I don't know how much power play passing ability there's going to be, or just pure deception with the skill, but my goodness, that shot is so good that it almost doesn't even matter. The big thing for Aitchison's translatability is how much of that confidence and that swagger is going to be realistic in the NHL, especially when it comes to the transition and offensive play. He really loves to step into the rush, step into odd man opportunities, go up right like a Matthew Schaefer in transition, but I just don't know how much he's going to be able to do that, since I don't think he has quite the Schaefer level of skating, especially as well as a skill level, and I just don't know if that's going to be an NHL trait for him, but I think at the very least, the goal scoring, the physicality, those things are going to translate pretty well. At the very least, I see him being just a solid depth defenseman, though most likely more of a number 4, number 5, maybe even number 3 defenseman if he's able to hit his max. I think when it's all said and done for the Islanders, it's kind of what you weigh as the most important things. For Montreal, I think they get a top pair right shot defenseman, which is a very hard thing to come across, or at the very least, a top 4 right shot defenseman. For the Islanders, they get, I think, 2 pretty solid top 6 forwards and wings for the future. Guys that most likely are going to be just really good second liners. Heineman is sure is playing on the first line, but I think in terms of your Stanley Cup winning team, he's probably more of a second line guy. And then you have Kashan Aitchison, who I think maxes out as probably an okay middle pair defenseman, really good bottom pair Ds. So it's kind of, what do you prefer? Do you want to solidify that top right shot defenseman spot, or do you kind of want to fill out the roster a bit more? I think for the Islanders, especially now that they have Matthew Schaefer and the transcendent piece that he is, I think for the Islanders, you kind of want to balance things a bit more, and then their prospect pool, they needed more assets, they needed more talent and to spread out throughout that lineup, and I think for both sides involved, again, it's exactly what they needed. Montreal did not need more assets, they did not need more prospects in that pool, they needed more quality on the NHL roster, they got it in Dobson, and the Islanders needed more depth, they needed more options, especially in the goal scoring department, and they're able to get it here in this trade too. I will say this, I think I would look a little bit less favorable to this trade for the Islanders if Matthew Schaefer hasn't been as transcendent as he has been, but now that you see the potential there, that you see him already becoming the Islanders' number 1 defenseman, the need for Noah Dobson just isn't quite there as much. Maybe it'll hurt him long term to not have him there, perhaps, but I think in the end, it was the smart move for both sides involved. And now that the Islanders have that Schaefer piece, they have that number 1 defenseman they can build around, having those smaller pieces around the team are going to become even more important. And a Kashan Aitchison right behind Schaefer as well, who can bring that snarl, bring that physical intensity, is also going to be pretty important in his role. Now, before we keep going in today's video, let's talk about today's sponsor in MyBookie. MyBookie. It seems like October is simply the best time to be a sports fan. I mean, that Game 7 between the Mariners and Blue Jays was absolutely insane. Congratulations to the Blue Jays fans, by the way. I'm a Rangers fan. We've had some bad blood in the past, but I'm rooting for you. But with all those upsets, comebacks, and major events, MyBookie lets you hit it all. But if you're looking to make bets all throughout this NHL season, MyBookie is the best place to do so with the odds and the spreads through every single game. Like I mentioned last time, I'm just a bit of a sicko, and before each game, I kind of like to look at the odds to see who's the favorite, who's trending in the right direction, and kind of get the info from everything. The best part about MyBookie is that if you are new, you just need to use promo code Graviteh, and any bet you choose up to 500 is fully covered. All you need to do to sign up is hit the link in the description down below. That'll take you to my Instagram, and then if you hit the link in my bio, it'll take you directly to MyBookie. And just use code Graviteh and you'll be good to go. A major thank you to MyBookie for sponsoring today's video, the best place to make your hockey bets all throughout this season. In terms of the closing thoughts, I just think this trade has aged beautifully for both sides involved, and I love to see that. I love to see these win-win trades. I hate to talk about the lose-lose ones because those are always just kind of depressing, but this one is very optimistic for both sides. And again, I think for both teams involved was exactly what the doctor ordered. And quite frankly, I think it was good for the Islanders kind of go in that rebuilding direction a little bit, retool just slightly as much as they could this last offseason and try to rebound over the next couple of years, because so far they're playing pretty well without Dobson, but the Montreal Canadiens are also playing really well with Dobson. So it's one of those things where I think both sides are pretty happy with what they got, as they should be. In terms of who I think wins this trade more, it mostly depends on how much Dobson is going to be able to continue on with this defensive ability. If he continues to play like he did in the first 7-8 games of the season throughout the course of this contract, then I think Montreal wins this trade by a okay margin, but I think the Islanders at the very worst are still a decent bit there. They're still in the same range of this deal, and I think that's pretty miraculous. It's very hard to win these trades when you're trading a top right shot defenseman like Dobson, but I think the Islanders have found a way to get very good value back. But those are my thoughts on what is right now a pretty big win-win trade for the Islanders and Montreal Canadiens. And hopefully you guys did end up enjoying the breakdown. If you did, make sure that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Comment down below. Who do you think has won this trade so far? The Islanders, the Habs, neither, both? Let me know your thoughts down below on that. And of course, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell if you haven't already. And share it with all the hockey fans you guys know online. And click on this card for all of my hockey trade talk right in one playlist. And I will see you guys in the next one. Have a fantastic hockey day, and goodbye.